Okay, if you're ready, I think we can start. Thank you very much for being in Pavilion of Turkey. My name is Kerem Kerer. With my associate curators, I'm the curator of the Pavilion of Turkey this year. As you may know, we organize a program called Vardiya. And during the whole process of the Biennale, we invite 122 students from all around the world, and they are going to come in weekly shifts just to transform into this very space into production, meeting and encountering the space. And we call this as Vardiya. And Vardiya has a lot of programs also. And today we have started the first shift with the arrival of the students in this morning. And in the morning we had two roundtable sessions. Kutanayat and Pelintan was with us. And right now we are going to start with the first keynote lecture with the attendance of Mr. Emre Arolat and Gonca Paşalar. First of all, I would like to thank you for all of you being here. It is really difficult for me to make a brief introduction of Emre Arolat for the very personal reasons, because his achievements probably you are aware of, including the Aga Khan Award and his recent projects also awarded internationally. He is not only a practicing architect, but also he's teaching in the very well-known universities, and including Yale School of Architecture. But for me, it is very unique to have him for the first of the keynotes. I would like to personally thank him for being here as a friend, and yes, I will, to our response as a friend, as my part of my family, let's say, and also of course as an admirer of his work. I'm very curious about the presentation. So I'm not going to talk that much. I don't think that you need more time. So thank you very much, Emre Arolat.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Kerem, for this great introduction. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm very happy and honored to be here with you. And thank you again, Kerem, for inviting me here. And today, generally, I'll try to talk about the resources, reasons, and the arguments of our architectural approach, together with our understanding of context and specificity, and of course, together with some clues about Turkish or Turkey's recent years and recent situations. Okay, speaking about context, we all know that in societies which are under the influence of capitalism, glamorous, charming, and seductive sources are increasing rapidly, and nowadays the object of desire are everywhere. This is the climate of all that is solid melts into the air, as Marshall Berman stated ingeniously. Not maybe for the moment in Venice, but no matter in which geography, sparkling icons, flashy and dashy high-rises emerge as the new symbols of the cities. And I believe that it won't be wrong to consider this situation as an epiphany of neocolonialism. And very briefly, I can say that those intentions are kind of gaining a general acceptance very quickly by the majority of the world, and the kind of neoliberal context is becoming essential day by day. Okay, this architectural biennial's title is Free Space, as we all know, and the curators say that it's a word which describes the generosity of spirit and the sense of humanity at core of architecture's agenda. They also believe that everyone has the right to benefit from architecture. They state about the role of architecture, saying that this profession has a mission to give shelter to our bodies and to lift our spirits. And it's okay, personally, I have no objection to this. Our bodies, our spirits, who can assert that they're not important? But Vardiya, or the shift is asking some other questions this year. Like they're quite simple, but also quite critical. Why does the biennial exist, or whom does it exist? For whom does it exist? What does the biennial do? I think you will discuss, or maybe you're already discussing those issues here in this pavilion. Those are important, and I'll continue to ask some other questions by myself. Okay, how important for an architect to be a part of this event? Why we are striving to do this every time? What is the meaning of a prestigious award for an architect? What is the purpose of this, for example, silver lion or golden lion? What are the benefits of winning this kind of awards? Are they always objective? Are they always meaningful or not? Is it that important for an architect to become visible? And we can ask thousands of questions, thousands of other questions. And I think it's a very fruitful idea of discussion, a kind of extensive field of comprehend, and a perfect topic to interrogate. Okay, now I want to change the subject for a while and give you some brief information about my background. By doing that, I'm aiming to give you an impression about Turkey's forming years as well. Of course, especially for our colleagues who are not familiar with it, I think it will be useful. As you may know, Istanbul was the capital city of Ottoman Empire during nearly more than 500 years, and Atatürk, who is the founder of Republic, decided to move the governance center to the central part of Anatolia and assigned Ankara as the new capital in 1922. And I can say that it was a quite critical decision. As you can see, this new capital looked like a big village rather than a real city in those days. Yes, it was small, but on the other hand, it was the fortress of republicanism and one of the most distinctive symbols of Turkish westernization. Meanwhile, my parents, who are both architects, established their office in Ankara, and they were participating in architecture competitions in order to get a job. And they did it finally after some attempts and various awards. They won the first prize in the competition of Zonguldak Hospital in 1963, and I came to this earth right at the same time. Maybe it's a sign, I don't know. After 7 years of hard work, they moved to Istanbul in 1968, and it was, of course, a much more vibrant, dynamic, and crowded city, also the financial capital of the country. At the same time, the amount of private sector's investments were increasing, and a variety of projects were on board in Arolat's Istanbul office. Meanwhile, I was planning to become a professional car racer, but somehow I found myself in the architectural studio in Istanbul, architectural school in Istanbul. And just after my graduation from the University of Mimar Sinan, I went to US in 1986 and worked as a junior architect for about a year. After an extremely pleasant and fruitful period in Georgetown, once again I was in Istanbul and joined to my parents. It was the beginning of my 17 years of partnership with them. As a brief summary, I can easily say that Arolat Architects was my principal university, but within 16 years of struggle, I felt that I should graduate from there. And then in 2004, we founded Emre Arolat Architecture together with my partner Gonca. It was the forming period of Turkey's last generation progress, and we had lots of work at that time. Most of them were quite challenging, and we were becoming more and more sensitive about our way of doing architecture. At that point, we were 6 architects in the office, and I was thinking that it was an ideal scale for an architectural practice. But I was totally wrong once again. Just after 4 years, we were more than 100. Even with this large group, we were always keen on conserving our amateur spirit, and we try so hard to not to become a large-scale corporate office. Instead, potentials of public benefit and sensitivity about the context were always the main issues of our practice. I never believed in a kind of architecture as an art of generating icons. Okay, in 2014, just after 10 years that we established EAA in Istanbul, although we were very busy with some large-scale projects in Turkey, we opened a second office in London. It was a kind of step to Europe for us. But I have to confess that it's been an extremely challenging geography for us. Without an exaggeration, I can clearly say that being Turkish is not the best specialty that you can have in Europe. Believe me, we had really hard times there. Finally, after years, we have some projects and we are dealing with a couple of them now for the moment. They are mostly mixed use with hotels, retail, and residentials for the moment. Okay, since I'm kind of unskillful in taking lessons, we opened another office in New York a couple of months ago. And this is roughly the result. Of course, with some lag, but we are in the process of teaming up now. These are from last week's conversation with Theo David, a professor from Pratt Institute. I have some friends here who were there also. We have just begun to work there. It's a peaceful place. Okay, I seem to hear the questions coming from you, from the audience. What is my problem? Why I'm kind of discomforting myself? What is the reason for me to strive with all of these? I mean, while I have a busy and successful office in Istanbul, why am I turning myself into a newcomer in those different geographies? Okay, you may be right, but anyway, it will take too much time to explain why. In order to do this, I should talk to you about the current socio-political climate in Turkey, about the politics of our government, about the construction sector, which became the principal engine of the economy for years. Long, long stories. I should talk about the new projects coming to the market every day since at least 10 years. And without any holistic approach or an integrative master plan, without any general strategy. context and plurality. Now we are working on the new one, and I hope that it will be published in 2019. Okay, these are some latest projects. Some of them are Turkey, in Istanbul, and in some other cities. And some of them are like this one in London, and this is in Oman, for example. As I said before, we design at different scales in different countries, and I believe that it's a huge responsibility for an architect. Okay, I will stop it now, and then go to the first project that I will talk to you a bit more with details. It was a couple years ago, a foundation called Sancaklar got in touch with our office about a project for a new mosque. And to speak honestly, as a prejudgment, I thought that we're looking for a replica of an Ottoman one. Because in Turkey, even today, when you design a new mosque, the first thing that you have to face is the figurative burdens of classical Ottoman mosque as a weird anachronism. And I told them immediately that I'm not that kind of architect, and this first meeting was finished in a very bad way. On the other hand, I'm a big fan of Ottoman mosques and find them extremely beautiful. But today, I mean, after about half a millennium, even though the construction techniques are totally renewed, I find this expectation quite pathetic. It's an issue that we face everywhere, and we are accustomed to see brand new replicas or even some caricatures every day, everywhere in the country. These are two examples from the latest parts of the 20th century. The one on the left, a replica in Ankara with maybe more reasonable proportions, but combined with a supermarket. And the one on the right, which is in Mersin, rather than minarets, as you can easily think that 6 rockets will start their engines soon and go to the moon. Here on the left, you see the original Selimiye Mosque from 16th century, one of the masterpieces of architect Sinan in Edirne. And on the right, the brand new Ataşehir Mosque built in 2010 in Istanbul as a clumsy replica of its original. A few days later, the head of the foundation called once again and came to the office with this picture. They were willing to build the mosque there, and I was extremely impressed by the lake and the untouched aura of the valley. Additionally, he said that they were ready to give me a realm of freedom, and I accepted the project. And in the beginning of the design process, we went back to the roots, to antiquity, to find a way for radicalization. And we saw that masjid simply means a place to prostrate and does not dictate any form. It has to be clean, and that's the only condition. So in a way, everywhere, anywhere on the earth can be a masjid or a praying place. And we discovered one more time that there is no formal definition for a mosque in the Quran or in any other source. So instead of searching for new and extravagant forms, we tried to reach the essence. And this was the essence of ritual of praying. On the other hand, we realized that due to the intense pressure of global capitalism, Islamic architecture is passing through a dangerous period, the danger of losing its virtue and its identity. I think a very good example of such contamination is Mecca, the most sacred site of Islam. And over the years, Mecca has transformed Ondan geçmiyor bir türlü. Yeah, I know that this is one of the best photographs, but it's enough. I mean. Ona gelince takılıyor. Sorry about that. Okay, you see the cascades following the natural slope turn into the stairs, and the lower level where you can find the entrances of the main hall, the ablution rooms, library, and the small tea room. And natural materials as local stone and timber together with water we used in this building as well. And like the old Islamic Ottoman complexes, this is a place for praying as well as gathering. And this is a kind of outdoor meditation space. Of course, sometimes different users could enjoy the place, and I like it. This is the Imam's house entrance, the main hall, and the ablution rooms. And we are inside. You see the mimbar, mihrab, and the natural light washing the Qibla wall reflects all kind of colors as the main decoration of the space. This is the wow letter from Mehmet Özçay, a very special calligrapher that we work together in this building. And something which is quite important for me, unlike the conventional mosques, here women can pray at the forefront, just in the same front with the men. And this was one of the most challenging issues of cogency process, I have to confess that. Especially on Fridays, the mosque is full, and I'm very happy about the embracement of the community. For good and all, I believe that this building opened the door slightly and turned at least a new and modest light on. Okay, we presented a new project a couple of months ago, and I believe that this is one of them that can use the same light that Sancaklar, I mean the previous project, turned on. But it's creating its own glance, and it's a community center containing a mosque once again. Our client, or maybe more than a client for the moment, became a friend of mine, is a wealthy young businessman from Emirates, and his companies handle several different kinds of business. A ruthless illness suddenly took his mother from him in an untimely manner. I remember our first talk. I was in a night train on my way to New York, coming back from Yale, where I was teaching at that time. It's been only 2 weeks, he says, and he struggled for years to save her. He left no treatment untried, but in vain. I can feel the pain in his voice from thousands of kilometers away. And a few weeks later, in an entirely different geography, he comes in a Tesla to get me from the hotel. Quite unexpected from a man who makes his living largely from oil. Plus, he is driving himself, not a custom here for such a rich man. And we talk along the way the land. He is well-educated, intelligent, forward-thinking, and open-hearted. And plus, he loves architecture. I wanted to build a mosque in my mother's memory, he says, and I hope it will help to change this terrible feeling I have inside of me. I have studied Sancaklar Mosque. I didn't want to talk with another architect. Just to remind you once more, you see here the panorama of the land of Sancaklar before the construction. And we arrived at Ajman after some quiet time. We go forward to the city center. The built environment is strangely disorganized, and it's obvious the city is changing its skin, big and small, high and low, all mixed in together. Here we are, he says, and we get out of the car and begin to walk. It's a midday. I'm thinking how horribly hot it must be in the summer. Okay, the lot is surrounded by roads. The sea lies northwest, as you can see the blue line, the northwest, but not visible from ground level. And you should go up about 15 meters. But the worst of all, huge residential buildings rise behind us, and they make a thick, gigantic wall. They are around 35 stories each. And I found myself murmuring at that time, there is the context for you, nothing to do with Sancaklar, and it seems that it will be a very hard this time. So a few days later, I'm back in New Haven in a simple university hotel, especially don't turn on the lights in my room. Night and fog are falling together. The city is completely steeped in the gloom. I sit at the wooden desk by the window, and my eyes are here, but my mind is thousands of kilometers away. And since it's impossible to deal with those giant structures, we will throw the ball from the other corner this time. And I quickly turn on the lamp. Beside are the hotel notepad, a soft pencil, and I relax. Okay, what you will watch now is the Nora Mosque and Community Center. It's a building which is nothing more than a contextual structure, a mosque which is not imposing a new typology, just as Sancaklar Mosque, which was designed to be nothing more than a contextual building, just as Sancaklar, which was not asserting to create a new typology. But it is another one, designed to be a part of another context. And are there any similarities? Maybe. Maybe we can talk about the essence of praying or about humbleness once again, but in a very different way. It's designed for a young man who lost his mother lately. He wanted me to design for her memory. Her name is Nora, and Nora means light in Arabic. And that's what I call specificity. Göstermiyor.
O zaman şeyden yapalım biz bunu. Karıştı.
Gelmiyor. Çıkmıyor.
Video durdu şu anda.
Video durdu, evet. Sen mi durdurdun, kim mi durdurdu? Geri alabilirsin. Şunu alabilirsin. I'm sorry, I don't know why, but the movie is a bit slowed down, but it's finishing in a minute. Massage. Okay, coming to the end, let me read you a quotation from the Quran. Even if I'm not an expert, this is my favorite one. First in Turkish. Yeryüzünde böbürlenerek yürüme. Asla yeri yaramazsın, boyca da dağlara eremezsin. It means something like this. Don't walk up in the earth bragging. You can never cleave the earth, nor can you reach up to the mountains. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to also invite Gonca Paşaro to the round table as well. So we have half an hour or maybe 45 minutes. It depends on your patience for the questions from the audience and also from the table. So if there is any, yes. Can you use the mic?
Hello. Okay. Thank you for your talk. I have a question about your transition from being based in Turkey to an international platform. Your brief kind of description of the construction craze in Turkey depicts that there's not much selection and there's this will for repetition and mass construction. And you mentioned that moving to London, it was very difficult for you to kind of start your practice there. And so I'm wondering, is it about the legislations or the control over designs, or what was the difference, or is it just being in a new place?
Okay, first of all, I like the more enlight something which I don't see any constructional crisis in Turkey. But there are some more crises, in my opinion. This was not my reason. I mean, the crisis of construction doesn't seem to be very visible for the moment. But there are some other political, sociological, and social crises rather than the constructional crisis. I was having this decision to have some different offices in some different geographies. I mean, the main reason was not the constructional crisis. London was different, but this is not only London. I mean, we choose London because we thought that it's the most cosmopolitan and in that way, maybe the easiest way to go in Europe, in the whole Europe. Even though I'm not a English speaker, I mean, I studied French in the high school and I'm not very fluent in English. I choose London because it was very different than France. For example, I thought every time that France will be very conservative, and it's not easy for a Turkish architect or Turkish firm to be able to have some position in the market in the architectural field. So that was the reason for us to go to London. I mean, to choose the London rather than Paris or Berlin. But at the end of the day, we realized that, as I told in my lecture, in my talk, that being Turkish is not the best thing that you can have as a specialty in Europe. In a way, it's not like in the United States, because I realized after that we opened an office in New York, I realized that everybody is much more welcoming somehow in the United States. I'm not talking about all the cities of the United States. I don't know all the cities of the United States. I used to live work in Washington, D.C. I traveled to some other big cities and some different cities. I don't know the whole states, but I can easily say that it's very different. I mean, being Turkish is not important or has no any negative effects for you to be an architect or to be in the market. But still, in London, if you are a Turkish, it's not very easy. If, for example, you become selected as finalists in a competition or let's say in an offer, And if you are not from Britain, or if you are not Brit, and if you are even not French maybe, or Romanian, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But if you're Turkish, you're not in the first row. I mean, kind of hating to talk like this. And I was always arguing about these kind of talks once some colleagues were doing this. But at the end of the day, I faced with something like this, because London is maybe can be the most cosmopolitan cities in the whole Europe, but still is a very conservative city.
Okay.
Hi. So I guess my question was is going to be about more like generally your approach to architecture. You compare it to the two mosques, and one almost being a replica of the past design, kind of, I guess, trying to bring it back to life in a sense, but without really adding anything in design and not really exploring anything within architecture. And then your new design, which kind of really like digging deep into like the origin of the idea of religion, and just really exploring these concepts. And I was just wondering, first of all, it being a very brave move to be able to design something so modern in like within a concept as a religion being so tied to tradition, and it kind of made me wonder about where the structures of the past or designs of the past are going today, kind of also considering the structure that we are like being in right now, and how it has survived from the past and therefore has so much value today. But then there are designs that have existed for such a long time, but today suddenly they're having to change because we're just kind of being able to take a different look on it, and perhaps like questioning it more into its depths. So I guess I was just asking, do you think there's like a way for these past designs to continue to exist today without just surviving?
I believe that, I mean, we have, as the contemporary architects who are doing some different works for the moment, I believe that it's very important to learn from the existing buildings, from the tradition. And in that manner, I think that there is a kind of sustainability in the outrageous design of traditional architecture. But it doesn't mean that you take them and you copy them and you paste them in a very easy way. But of course, for example, in Sancaklar or in the other mosque, we learned from the antiquity. We learned from the other mosque buildings, and we learn from the other topographical buildings as well. I mean, we learn from the masters of stones. We learn from the how to enlighten the space, how to use the, I mean, natural light in a space. We learned from some cinematographic effects, and I mean, all of them are existing today. And then it's important for an architect to be dynamic on this, and then to observe in a very broad sense the whole world, with the ecological effects, with the political things, and with the economics and everything. So it's a big basket, and inside of this basket, to be able to have a considerable design, the traditional architecture is one of the most important assets, in my opinion. But it doesn't make any sense to copy it. I don't know if it's a good answer to your question.
Thanks for presentation. Some architects create that meaningless situations. What you said beginning, işte some observable, some stranger buildings or some.
You mean the iconic buildings?
Yeah.
Yeah, the buildings to be designed as to be iconic. Are you meaning this?
Okay. What do you think about that?
I mean, as I said in my talk, I don't believe that as architects we have such a mission. I mean, of course, after that you make a design or you design a building, it can become an iconic building. There's no problem with that. But what is problematic in my mind is doing architecture to create some icons. I mean, this was my issue. You have something to say about that?
When do you finish to make design decision?
When?
Do you finish?
Never. Okay, frankly saying, I don't like any of my buildings. So I see lots of mistakes, I see lots of problems, and then I hate to go to my buildings. I hate to see them I mean, it happens every time. None of them is finished, in my opinion, design-wise.
Very good. Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. You had an incredibly profound way of describing what you've been able to transform in the assumed realities of what a mosque can be. And there's a very concrete result of what that is, meaning that there's kind of direct political influence change through the work itself. In some way, all the desired kind of ambitions of what architecture can do manifests itself through a very specific proposal. And we could maybe put this under the umbrella of a cultural project, religious project, etc. But when we kind of move to the other spectrum of our practice, where we need to deal with the market, where we need to deal with the speculative projects, and maybe face all the politics that you very profoundly described as well, which are extremely problematic, but nevertheless define the landscape within which we operate. Do you see any potential for architects to participate in this, in the way you're able to participate within the mosque project? Meaning, the reality of a capital market can be altered through our practices.
Yes, I extremely believe in it. And for that reason, I'm doing architecture, because it's not the case that we are doing mosques every time. I mean, and we are like kind of agents of this system. And but being the agent of the system doesn't mean that you have to obey everything, doesn't mean that you have to obey all the rules that it was structured before you, and then it doesn't mean that you can change some of them. So I hardly believe that one of the most important missions of an architect is having kind of a critical role in all the projects, even in some mixed-use projects in the center of Istanbul, even in Zorlu Center, even in Mecidiyeköy Towers, even in, I don't know, Hudson River Yard. I mean, for the architect, there are always lots of spaces. There are always lots of rooms to deal with the realities, let's say, or deal with the rules of the capital. And it's always possible, in my opinion, to make, I mean, to take the direction to another field, and to fight with it. I know that, I mean, the majority of time you will lose this game, and it's a, I mean, it's a hopeless game. But why we are doing architecture? We should play this game.
I mean, you're kind of describing almost a double agency, like somehow participating in it, but with an agenda that's perhaps hidden, perhaps operating from underneath, almost kind of a narrative that pushes back against the forces that push constantly against the practice or discourse of architecture. But I sympathize with that 100%.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can add something. Of course, there are always limits for specific persons. So, I mean, I'm not saying only architects. I mean, we are all human beings. For example, for us, for me, for myself, I have some limits. I don't do everything that was proposed to do to us. I refuse to do, for example, the third Istanbul airport project to the northern side of the city. I hardly understand the reason of doing this third bridge in this specific region, but I mean, it's there are always lots of reasons to fight with and lots of ways to fight with those issues, and I believe that this is one of the most important missions for an architect.
I have a question indeed. But at the same time, we are receiving some questions online because we broadcasted this meeting online through our YouTube channel, and we received a lot of questions through that. But before that, I'd like to ask a question. When I watch a presentation, the two projects that you show were actually interesting because of the tone of the, let's say, the atmosphere. So when you talk about the situation and understanding the context, that gives an idea about the questions you ask, of course, and that also makes it much more clear about how you approach. But on the other hand, still you are creating a certain atmosphere, and probably it's also the way you present is also saying that it's not a coincidence. So you are, for instance, the way you choose to present the last work was the video animation. So it was based on the idea of the atmosphere. So this is something that you are willing to design. And how do you make the design decisions? Let's say, how do you refine that atmosphere through the design?
Okay, thank you for this question. You know, I mean, we worked with Kerem for maybe 6 or 7 years, and he knows my attitudes. I know his attitudes, and this is a very specific question, but it's a very clever one as well, because I'm using always the word context when I'm describing a project, but it doesn't mean that I always obey to the I mean, I believe that we have to obey to the context or sustain the context. I mean, sometimes you have to somehow discover the context to be able, or search the research, make a deep research about the context in order to get rid of it, or in order to distract it. Because, for example, in the second project in Ajman, we should do this. In Sancaklıay, vice versa, it was a context that we could easily be a part of it and use it in a way, but in Ajman, it was a very dangerous thing to try to be a part of it. So, in a way, we should try to create our own atmosphere, our own aura, and we we should create, we should try to create an atmosphere which is very specific, which is not having any interaction with the vicinity, with the surroundings, because it was not possible to have a relationship with this 35 floor of skyscrapers. But in a way, of course, it's still on this context, on this location, and in my opinion, it will kind of change the destiny of this context as well, because we made I didn't tell everything, but we made the depth research on the area. There is no any square meter of public space there. For that reason, we wanted to convince the client to not to construct just a mosque, but creating some public spaces, outer public spaces, and inner public spaces, and then we added lots of things to the programs.
So those were not initially in the program,
No.
so you proposed it.
No, not at all. I mean,
that's also unusual.
Yeah, of course. You know me. I mean, I generally say, talk with my colleagues in the office that we have to understand the program and we have to understand the client, blah, blah. But that in this time, it was a different situation, and then we would be able to add lots of things to the program as well. Some workshop areas, some art spaces, and an open park on top of the building, which was not on the program, and it was very hard time for me to convince the emir about that, because he told me, I didn't see something like this. People will throw, will go down from here, and then it will be very dangerous, blah, blah. And it was not easy to convince him. So in a way, as well as I understood from your question, yes, we are very much concerned about context, but we are using in different ways.
The word atmosphere used, of course, relating to the research of Peter Zumthor and the other contextual architects that I know that you are a follower and you are aware of that. So that's why, while I was talking about while I was using the word atmosphere, I was actually trying to understand how you relate with the existing conditions. Well, are there any questions?
I think there's a question from.
So we can also check the YouTube account if you like, while we are waiting.
Bunu soracak mısınız?
Okay, I can read that. Okay. So, the question is, before your New York office,
who is?
John Tanyeli is asking this question. Before your New York offices were up and running, you have once described your motivation to migrate your architectural practice to overseas as an attempt to explore new ventures in your late career. He said, you even said that you wanted to take a beating and become a newcomer again, which you also mentioned in your speech. Compared to the recent advent of a brain drain with the migration of educated youth in Turkey, was your choice to rebase yourself in New York a personal choice? To seek a peace of solace? Or peace of solace?
Okay.
Or an artistic or commercial one in search for fresh ideas. So basically, this was.
Okay, as I say always, life is not that simple. There is not always one reason to do something. It's a much more complicated situation. I'm not very pragmatic or very, let's say, rational guy. Sometimes I do some stupid things. I try to not to be regret, but for example, the London example was I don't want to say a mistake, but it was a big challenge for us. So in a way, I did a lot to sustain this office and to sustain it. And I don't know about New York. I'm much more hopeful about United States, if you want the truth. But as John's question, I don't have only one reason. I have more than one reason. Of course, I have my personal reasons. I like to be kind of a newcomer, and walking on the streets and nobody knows me there. No any waitress or no any restaurant owner knows me there. And then I'm very happy to live like this, because in Istanbul it's not very easy to live like this. I'm not complaining about that. This is normal. I mean, sometimes once you become a bit well known, this happens, and there's no big problem with that. I'm not complaining. But the other one is sometimes it's very challenging, but it's very alluring as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's also the thing that, I mean, there aren't much international practices in Istanbul, and actually your next step is quite understandable in the context of Europe, for instance. So maybe it is also, we should also think that like that. I mean, that would be normally the next step of such a scale office. And today we are doing this actually keynote speech as a part of an international event in a group. Let's say the attendance of the group is our multinational group, and we are claiming that we are part of the international architecture culture. Whether we accept it or not, whatever we build is a part of the the beyond our nation's borders, and what we are producing and what we are willing to do is just start a discussion within our existence. So if there isn't any question, I would like to end this session. Thank you very much for the first day of Vardiya. Thank you very much for being with us. And personally, I would like to thank Mr. Emre Arolat for the presentation.
Thank you.